Over in the context of Marvel Comics, the publisher is set to debut a brand new Jean Grey title. Now, usually this would be business as usual for Marvel's X-Men, but I think things take a much different turn when you put this event into a little bit more context and take a look at the X-Men's recent Hellfire Gala. During that event, the anti-mutant group known as Orchis went ahead and attacked the X-Men and even ended up killing Jean Grey. My name is Arico Braddock, and today, let's go ahead and dive into the pages of Jean Grey's brand new solo series to see if she's able to come back from the death. But before we get deeper into the video, I want to encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button if you enjoy our content. Superstar creators take Jean Grey's legacy to fiery new heights. After the events of the Hellfire Gala, Jean's life is in shambles, Mutantkind is in dire straits. And there's nothing this founding X-Man can do. She'll have to save herself first, and that means looking into her past for the moment when it all went wrong, in a desperate attempt to save her and all of Krakoa's future. Legendary writer Louise Simonson returns to the X-Men with a story full of fan-favorite moments, heartrending revelations, and pulse-pounding devastation. Jean Grey Issue 1 is written over from Louise Simonson, featuring art from Bernard Chang. We have colors from Marcelo Maiolo, letters from VC's Ariana Maher, and designed by Jay Bowen. We also have a cover for the series coming in over from Amy Reeder. I think Reeder's art showcases some of the interesting symbolism that readers can see behind some of the interior pages over in Jean Grey Issue 1. And I want to extend a quick thank you over to Adventures in Poor Taste for posting our preview of the issue so incredibly fast here. Wanted to spend a few moments focusing in on some of the artwork in the issue over from Bernard Chang before we dive into the wild script Louise Simonson delivered over for this tale. Now, really appreciate this opening page here showcasing the moments after the Hellfire Gala for Jean. I think the way that some of her hair is like exaggerated and flowing through this kind of title card here is just a really cinematic and bold way to open up the issue. Bernard Chang has such a kind of clean and precise line, but there is so much style in some of his artwork, which I think captures some of the nuance within this X-Men title. This next page in the issue was absolutely thrilling as well, showing all these kind of disparate moments over in Jean's life. And watching Bernard Chang illustrate so many of these sequences and these kind of fast panels that are shaped in really interesting ways, I think did a great job pulling on some of the intrigue of the title too. As a reader, when I went through some of these pages, I was left biting my nails, wondering where Jean would be headed next. Moving forward, I cannot speak further about this issue without discussing some spoilers. So I want you to be warned here that throughout the course of the remainder of this review, we will be talking about some spoilers present within Jean Grey Issue 1. So over on the next page here, we get a fantastic idea of where this series is headed, because the very next plot thread that Jean Grey goes and picks up on is exploring what happened to the time-displaced X-Men, especially after they returned over to their own time in the issue. I think it's absolutely quite thrilling checking out some of these pages and picking up on a plot thread that has just been left dangling in the X-Men line for such a long time over at Marvel Comics. One thing that's really exciting about the all-new X-Men and the fact that these time-displaced characters are being utilized right now is the fact that in Kamala Khan's resurrection, some of those memories over between Kamala Khan and Cyclops, when Cyclops was time displaced working with the Champions, has now been retconned into Scott's memory. So some of these plot threads are already being referenced in other comics, like Marvel's main X-Men title. Since you're already plugging on some of the plot threads for other titles, utilizing some of these characters for the main Jean Grey book, I think is a great story idea and a great way to pick up on a really intriguing aspect of recent X-Men continuity over for Fall of X and the Krakoa era of X-Men as a whole here. I think Bernard Chang just does a lovely job directing some of the facial expressions for the various characters and showcasing that kind of young nature for a lot of these heroes as well throughout the tale here. Getting to see some of the new costumes that these characters adopt and watching them enter a more classic status quo for Professor Xavier and Magneto sort of being the villain of the franchise as a return to the original status quo of the series, these elements threw me for a loop but got me really intrigued in this X-Men title. That being said, though, the one takeaway I have as I continue to check out more and more of this title is the fact that this book is completely unfriendly to new readers. If you're not aware of existing X-Men plot threads, this is going to be a really hard book to read through, especially because it's the debut for such a popular X-Men character. But at this point in the space of comics, I'm wondering how many fresh fans will be picking up this issue, even if it is a new #1. And if the majority of the readers are seasoned veterans from recent X-Men comics, I would say the more X-Men you've read, the more interesting this issue becomes as Louise Simonson continues to kind of spin existing scenarios for X-Men characters on their head, thanks to this really interesting status quo for the heroes. I was really struck by Bernard Chang's art later on in the issue. I thought he was able to drive the animosity between the characters so well and really show that youthful exuberance for all of the supporting cast from the original kind of time-displaced X-Men. Plus, over in the series too, there's just something a little bit sinister about Bernard Chang's art that I think captures this era of Jean Grey really, really well. This story almost reads like a thriller tale where Jean's monstrous actions end up catching up with her. I think this was another spot where Bernard Chang was able to capture some of the impact and expressions from the various characters with tons of intrigue to keep me interested in where this series is headed next. So at the end of the day here, Marvel's latest Jean Grey series kept me guessing until the very last page. I really have to commend Marvel and this creative team of Louise Simonson and Bernard Chang for having such an interesting vision for the title. I'm curious also to see how much Marvel's editorial was involved in some of the planning phases over for this story, but just still have to commend each creator involved here. I think instead of telling like a remedial solo series where a character has a quick revival, this issue of Jean Grey really dives into the past of X-Men to showcase how this franchise is headed into the future and to take on a plot thread that's been dangling from some other X-Men titles in really, really fascinating ways. Louise Simonson always finds something interesting to say within some of these scenes and really plays up the animosity between these various X-Men characters. I'm really hoping that everything in this Jean Grey series is leading to something really interesting over at Marvel. And instead of this being the end of Jean Grey, it is the beginning of maybe a return over for the time-displaced X-Men. I want to know from you, did you enjoy this issue as much as I did? Did this issue also keep you guessing until the final couple pages? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks so much for catching our video review over on Jean Grey issue 1. We'll be back to cover future issues of the series to see where the time-displaced X-Men are headed next and to find what's next over in Fall of X. Thanks so much for coming to check out our video, and I'll see you in the next one.